I had never believed a single image could strike straight into the heart like a blade. But that night, under the old sycamore, I saw it. A Doberman mother hung suspended from a rope. Her emaciated body swayed in the wind, each rib showing through a thin, stretched skin. Her front legs dangled helplessly. Her breath came in ragged shards, as if cut apart. Below her, two tiny pups trembled. One rose on its hind legs until its whole body tilted, trying to touch its mother's belly, as if to keep her from slipping away. The other gave a thin, strangled cry that dissolved into the wind, unheard by anyone. I froze. My heart slammed against my chest like it might split open. And for the first time in years, my eyes burned. Not from the wind, but because I knew I was staring at a tragedy my whole town had chosen to ignore. In Ravenwood, we had learned to close doors. People saw and turned away, pretended not to hear, pretended not to know. I had done the same. I once believed silence was the only way to survive in a place like this. But tonight, that scene tore the shell apart. A door opened nearby. Light spilled across the patchy yard. A shadow glanced out and then yanked the door shut. No shout, no footstep. Just the hinges squealing and falling silent, like a period at the end of a sentence. The wind hissed through the sycamore, knocking the mother's body against the bark. A dry crack echoed, cold as a countdown clock. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. And in that moment, a memory surged back, the one I had tried to bury. The day the ambulance took my son, the day I lost him, the little black dog he used to clutch to his chest. I heard that same cry inside my head now, braided with the Doberman's hoarse moan. I turned away. I walked a few steps, telling myself what I always did. Not my business. Just a dog. Someone else will handle it. I had said those lines so many times, like everyone in this town, but the farther I went, the clearer I heard the tiny claws scraping at the dirt. The clearer I saw those pups stretching, reaching, failing to touch. I stopped. Inside me was an empty space I'd kept locked with silence. But those two fragile lives, with their blind trust, their feral faith that their mother would live if they didn't let go, had found the key. My hands shook as I turned back. Moonlight broke through the branches, spilling across the trembling body. All around Ravenwood lay still, as if nothing was happening. Only me, standing alone, facing the truth. If I walked away one more time, no one would be left. My breath came fast, my fingers tightening. And in the dark, I heard my own voice slip out, weak as a confession. God, what am I supposed to do? I stepped back, my heels slipping on the cracked, dry earth. Ravenwood no longer looked like a town to me. It was a graveyard of breathing souls. Each house stood upright like a coffin set on end. Doors sealed tight, curtains drawn. Yet I could feel them watching. Thin slivers of eyes glinting through door cracks, needles of sight pricking the back of my neck. Raven still hung there. Her body swung like the pendulum of a broken clock, counting down the last seconds of her life. Her legs twitched, claws raking the air as if searching for a patch of ground to prove the earth was still real. Beneath her, Scout and Lila crouched low, tearing at the hard dirt with their tiny claws. Their breaths came shallow, old man thin, winter fragile. I wanted to scream, to shout, to pound on every door, but my throat locked as if a hand were clamped tight around it. A wooden door creaked open to my right. The hinges moaned into the night like a confession. A man in a baseball cap stuck his head out, his eyes cloudy as swamp water. "Get out! You trash!" he barked. Then he flung a bucket of foul water at the dogs. Black water splashed wide, stinking of sewage. Scout flinched hard and pressed against Lila, the two of them making a sound so small it didn't even register as a cry. Raven tried to twist to shield them, the rope biting tighter, snapping dry like a bone breaking. I saw her head jerk back, her spine arch in pure despair. My fists closed. I wanted to run, to rip the rope apart. But my legs froze, glued to the ground. Across the street, a small grocery glowed dimly. Its yellow light stretched thin across the dirt like a dying breath. The old shopkeeper stood in the doorway, eyes fixed on the scene. I thought he might step forward. Instead, he sighed and pulled the steel shutter down. The squeal of metal rolled out, long, cold, like a line drawn under hope. Children's laughter drifted in. I turned. They ran past, hands full of stones. One boy stopped, aimed. I opened my mouth, but too late. The stone flew, skimming Raven's flank before thudding into the ground. Raven made no sound, but Lila's wail tore out, small yet slicing through my chest like glass. A mother's voice snapped from inside. "Leave those strays alone. They'll bring sickness into the house." The door slammed. The bolt slid home with a chill like a verdict. Raven still breathed, but slower, weaker. Each inhale seemed to pull the whole town down with her. I saw Scout and Lila lift their heads, their eyes pushing a plea into me, handing me a weight I wasn't ready to carry. The air thickened, heavy as smoke. Every door that slammed was another knife in my back. Every averted gaze, another cut. And me, still standing here, unmoving, an accomplice by my own silence. My hands trembled, my heart hammered. I heard the rush of my own blood louder than the wind. I drew a breath, but it refused to fill my lungs. I looked at Raven. Her eyes were cloudy but locked on mine, asking a question without sound. And inside my skull, one thought rang clear, sharp, driving out all other noise. If I turn away, how am I any different from them? I stood under the sycamore, my heart pounding against my ribs. Every door around me was shut, as if the whole town had signed a pact to abandon what was happening. I was not alone, yet the feeling of it wrapped around me like a shroud. Then I realized I wasn't the only one watching. Across the street, in the white-painted house, a second-floor window stood ajar. A thin, stooped figure leaned out, fingers gripping the frame. Warm light from inside caught the lines of his face. I knew him, Mr. Whitaker. People called him the Keeper of Memory in Ravenwood because he had worked at Ash Hollow Farm before it went dark. I knew he saw everything. Those eyes, clouded with age, traced the scene below, resting long on Raven's suspended body. I waited for him to open his door. I waited for him to come down, to hold a knife, to do the right thing. But he didn't move. He just stood there, hands trembling, eyes full of shadow. Then the curtain slid shut, and his shape vanished. A cold spike slid down my spine. If even the oldest among us, the one who had seen this town's best days, wouldn't act, who would? A small sob pulled me back. Emily, my daughter, was standing in the doorway. I had no idea how long she'd been there. Her nightgown clung thin to her knees, her bare feet dusted with dirt. Her eyes were wide, fixed on Raven and the two pups below. She was shaking, but she didn't look away. "Mom," her voice cracked, so soft I almost didn't hear. "We have to help." My chest constricted. I wanted to pull her inside, close the door, tell her, not our business. I had lived my whole life with that phrase, but when I looked into her eyes, I saw more than fear. I saw faith, the kind I'd lost long ago. Raven still hung there, fading. Scout and Lila kept scraping, clawing, as if their tiny love could hold back the rope. I looked at Emily and saw she was about to cry. I whispered, more to convince myself than her. "Emily, you don't understand. This town isn't what you think. People won't, but we can." She cut in, her voice trembling but firm. I froze. That sentence drove like a blade through the hard shell I'd built around my heart. I turned back to the window where Mr. Whittaker had been. No light, no one. Only my daughter, a child with eyes brighter than the moon spilling through the branches. And in a flash I understood. 2 generations stood before me. One old, watching, silent, burying memory. One new, not yet afraid, but brave enough to speak. And me? Stuck between them. The wind blew again. The rope hissed. Raven's body jerked, then hung still. I heard Emily's breath catch. Lila gave a sound so thin I felt my heart crack. I no longer heard the town, no doors slamming, no voices, only my heartbeat, Raven's broken breathing, and Emily's whisper looping over and over. "Mom, please. Please." I bit my lip until the taste of iron spread. I wanted to scream, to run, to end this scene. But my legs stayed frozen. I looked from my front door to the sycamore, torn in 2. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Mr. Whittaker again. The window cracked open, light returning dimly. He stood there, one hand on his chest, the other clutching something that glinted. I recognized his old medallion. His eyes shone with tears. Then he shut the window. Silence. He chose silence. Emily didn't. She stepped off the porch, her bare feet touching the dirt, moving one step closer to Raven. My head spun, my heart falling out of my chest. I lunged to pull her back, whispering fast, "No, Emily! You don't understand." She turned to me. A tear slid down her cheek. "Mom, if we walk away, how are we any different from them?" The words landed heavier than any sentence a court could hand down. I stood there, caught between the memory of loss, the cowardice of the past, and the clear eyes of my child. And in the dense dark of Ravenwood, I knew one thing. If I didn't act, a part of my soul would die at the base of that tree. The night in Ravenwood was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. No wind, no insects, just the heavy pulse in my chest, as if the whole town had stopped breathing with me. The house was dark. The clock had frozen at 11:47. I sat by the window, staring out at the distant sycamore, where Raven still hung. Her shape melted into the dark, barely visible, unmoving. But I knew she was there. I knew. Because I could still hear it. The broken breaths, the faint scratching of small claws against dry earth. Then, silence. A silence thick as a shroud over a coffin. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. My heart stumbled, like it suddenly realized something terrible had ended. I stood so fast that the chair crashed behind me. Emily was asleep on the couch, her hands gripping the blanket, the edges of her lashes still marked with dried tears. I brushed her hair gently, meaning to lay her down, but in that same moment, I heard it. Tap, tap. I froze. The sound was faint, fragile, but real. Again, tap, tap, like tiny nails striking wood. Right outside the door. I held my breath. The hair on my neck rose. My hand found the latch, heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo inside my ears. Images flooded in. Raven's hanging body, her fading eyes, the rope creaking against bark. Emily's whisper, "If we walk away, how are we any different?" I pulled the latch. The door swung open. Cold air slapped my face. Scout. The smallest pup. His whole body caked in mud, fur clumped and soaked, legs trembling. Each step lifted like it weighed the world. He collapsed on the threshold, gasping, his nose brushing the wooden floor, not barking, not whining, just pleading by being there. I knelt. My hands shook as I touched his body. His skin was cold, but still alive. Scout stretched once, straining, and gave a sound. A bark. Thin, weak, high, and thread-like. But it cut straight through the darkness of Ravenwood. It didn't echo. It reached. A sound so small it carried where words never could. A sound that pierced straight into the buried part of me, the part that still knew how to fear, to love, to fight back. My throat closed. Tears stung. Emily startled awake, eyes wide. She ran to the door and dropped to her knees beside me. "Mom, he's alive!" Her voice cracked, trembling between terror and hope. "He's alive, Mom!" Tears blurred my vision. I pressed my hand to Scout's back, feeling the rapid, erratic heartbeat, weak, but stubborn. He had crawled across an entire sleeping town to get here, to call, to drag me out of silence. In that instant, everything crashed in at once. The slamming doors, the turned-away faces, the curses, the rope tightening around Raven's neck. It all swirled through my head like a storm. I looked at Scout, just a filthy, shivering scrap of life, and realized he had done what no adult in this town had the courage to do. He hadn't turned away. A shiver ran down my spine. I heard my own voice, barely more than a whisper. "We can't wait any longer." Not another second, Emily gripped my hand, her eyes shining through her tears. "Mom, please." It wasn't a plea. It was a command from something higher than fear, a voice of conscience, cornering me where no excuses could hide. I nodded. A trembling nod, but a decision. I lifted Scout into my arms. His body weighed almost nothing, like a vow. His faint warmth seeped into my hands, and I shuddered as if waking from a long sleep. Emily clutched my sleeve. Together we stepped out onto the porch. No words, no plan, just motion. The wind sliced across my face. The Ravenwood sky hung heavy as lead, but inside my chest, that small bark still echoed. One final cry. Not just a plea, a summons. I held Scout close and stepped into the dark road. Each stride struck hard against my fear. I knew Raven was still there, in the heart of the night, waiting for someone to come. And this time, no one would close their door, not me. I turned to Emily and whispered, "Let's go." And through the darkness of Ravenwood, that tiny bark kept ringing in my chest, a flicker of light, fragile but bright enough to lead the way. Scout was still trembling in my arms. His breathing came fast, his tiny chest jerking with every beat, but his eyes were bright. That look drilled straight into me, an order, not a plea. Emily stood beside me, clutching the hem of my shirt. Her voice quivered, but her words were steady. "Mom, we have to go. Right now." My whole body shook. I had hesitated too long. And now, with Scout gasping in my arms, there was no excuse left to hide behind. I nodded. We ran off the porch, swallowed by Ravenwood's darkness. The wind slashed across my face, carrying the faint rasp of rope rubbing against the sycamore branch. Each step closer made my heart pound harder until it hurt to breathe. Raven was still hanging there. Her legs no longer kicked. Her body hung heavy, lifeless, like a clock with its pendulum stopped. Beneath her, Lila crouched against the roots, letting out a thin cry, her eyes pleading up into the dark. "Mom! Hurry!" Emily screamed. I set Scout down. He staggered but pushed forward toward his mother, whimpering softly. I lunged for the rope, hands shaking. The fibers were coarse, digging deep into my skin. I pulled. Nothing. Raven's breath rasped out, low, hoarse, fading like a candle struggling for air. "No, not here. Not like this," I whispered, scraping my hands raw as I clawed at the knot. Emily dropped to her knees, wrapping her small hands around Raven's legs, trying to lift her weight, to ease the choking pull of the rope. I heard her sob, her feet slipping on the dirt, but she didn't let go. "Mom, do it!" she cried. In that moment I saw my son again, his face, the last time I held him, the sirens, the antiseptic smell, the look in his eyes as he whispered my name. I had been powerless then. Not this time. I screamed, pulling with everything I had, nails tearing, muscles burning. The rope finally gave, snapping loose, slicing open my palms. But I didn't care. Raven fell. Her weight slammed into me, knocking me flat onto the ground. Her breath hit my neck, hot and raw, thick with blood and dirt. I wrapped my arms around her, shaking, whispering into the night, "It's okay. You're safe now." Raven didn't open her eyes, but her chest moved, shallow, uneven, but alive. Emily knelt beside us, tears streaming, clutching Scout and Lila as they burrowed into their mother's side. 3 fragile lives pressed together, trembling, refusing to let go. Somewhere in the distance, I heard movement, windows opening, light spilling out. Someone was watching. Maybe Whitaker, maybe a neighbor. I didn't know. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I didn't turn away. I slid my arms beneath Raven's body, lifting. The weight was crushing, but I clenched my jaw, forcing myself upright. Emily ran beside me, carrying Scout and Lila. Together, we stepped out from under the sycamore's shadow. I could hear everything, the pounding of my heart, Raven's ragged breaths, and Scout's faint bark. Not a plea anymore, a promise. The night in Ravenwood was still dark, but somewhere in that darkness, a door had opened. Raven felt heavy as stone in my arms, yet somehow I carried her home. The door closed behind us, and for the first time since stepping into that night, I felt myself tremble. The kitchen was narrow, lit by a single weak bulb that gave everything a faint amber glow. I spread a blanket on the floor and lay Raven gently on her side. Scout and Lila pressed against her belly, letting out small, pleading whimpers, as if their voices alone could keep her heart beating. Emily ran for water, towels, and old bandages. I checked Raven's breathing. Weak, ragged. Her neck was raw, the rope marks cut deep, nearly to the bone. I cleaned the wounds with salt water, my hands shaking but steady enough to go on. Each time Raven drew a breath, her chest shuddered, and I felt my own lungs fight to follow. Emily placed a trembling hand on Raven's back and whispered, "Stay. Please stay." I looked at her, then at the 3 shivering lives in front of me. Something inside me broke open. I pulled out the old first aid box, tore the bandage, and wrapped it around Raven's neck. Blood seeped through, slow, then slower. I wiped her fur clean, streak by streak, as sweat ran cold down my temples. The room filled with the rasp of Raven's breath and Emily's soft murmurs. Somehow, between us, we were holding her here, one fragile second at a time. Then came a knock. 3 times. Heavy. I jumped. Emily clutched my hand. I opened the door. Mr. Whitaker. He stood there in his thick coat, face hollow, eyes rimmed red. In his hands was an old wooden box bound with a leather string. "I saw it," he whispered. "I can't stay silent anymore." I stepped aside. He entered slowly, the light washing over his worn face, eyes heavy with memory. He knelt beside Raven, his trembling hand brushing her fur. "This breed, they weren't abandoned by chance," he said, his voice breaking. "Ash Hollow Farm used to breed Dobermans for patrol work, military contracts, security campaigns. When the farm collapsed, they didn't just leave the land. They left the dogs, tied them, hung them, tried to erase the proof." His words fell into the room like a blade. Emily covered her mouth, eyes wide. I saw the pain he carried, but also the cowardice that had let that pain last so long. He opened the box. Inside were old black and white photographs, blurred with age. I saw rows of Dobermans standing tall, ears sharp, eyes proud. And then one picture. One dog hanging from a sycamore tree. My stomach turned. "Ravenwood watched this happen," he murmured, voice cracking. "We stood by. I stood by, and now it's happening again." I looked down at Raven, gasping for air, then at Scout, Lila, and Emily. My blood burned. I tightened the bandage around Raven's neck, jaw clenched. "Not again," I said, my voice low, shaking. "Not in front of me." Whitaker bowed his head, tears sliding down his cheeks. "Maybe," he whispered. "This is our last chance to make it right." And in that moment, I understood. The story wasn't just about Raven. It was about a town that had chosen silence for too long. And if I didn't stand up now, Emily would grow up inside the same darkness. I pressed my hand against Raven's chest. Her heartbeat was faint, but steady. I looked at Emily. She nodded, eyes glistening, and for the first time in years, I saw light in her face. The kind of light that could set all of Ravenwood ablaze. The next morning, Raven opened her eyes. Just for a moment, the light hit her clouded pupils, and I knew she was still here. I sat beside her, my hand resting lightly on her chest. The heart was still beating, slow but steady. Emily had fallen asleep by Raven's feet, her head resting on her arm. On the floor, Scout and Lila were curled up tight, letting out tiny noises in their dreams, as if dreaming of the mother they'd almost lost. Outside, the snow had begun to melt. For the first time in weeks, I heard water dripping from the eaves. A simple sound. But to me, it was the rhythm of life returning. The wooden door creaked open. Mr. Whitaker stood there, holding a notebook. His face looked different, like a man who had finally laid down a burden he'd carried for half a century. "Sarah," he said quietly, "they're waiting for you outside." I frowned. "Who?" "The whole town." I stepped out onto the porch. 10, then 20 people stood in the pale gray morning, wearing wool hats and heavy coats, faces streaked with dirt. The same people who had slammed their doors shut on Raven were now looking at me as if waiting for judgment. Matthew, the grocer, was the first to speak. "We were wrong." The words dropped into the cold air like a pebble into ice, cracking, spreading, reaching everyone. Then another voice. "I saw her too, but I pretended not to. I chased them off my yard. I thought someone else would help." I said nothing. I just looked at them. Each confession felt like an old wound tearing open. Then Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "We can't go back. But we can start over. Mom and I saved Raven. Now we have to save the others." Silence. Then Mr. Whitaker lifted the notebook in his hands. "I have the old records from Ash Hollow Farm," he said. "Names of every dog, every man who worked there. This isn't just their guilt, it's ours. But we can reverse it. We can rebuild it. turn it into a refuge. Haven House. The name lingered in the air. Haven House. A few people repeated it under their breath, then they nodded. No speeches, no orders, no prayers. Just footsteps, beginning to move. By noon, Emily, Whitaker, and I stood before Ash Hollow. The house was collapsing in the field, walls cracked, roof caved in, and the smell of mold and rust thick in the air. But it didn't frighten me anymore. I saw only the frame of a second chance. People began to clean. Men carried boards. Women scrubbed the walls, washing away dried stains that looked too much like blood. Children ran through the yard, laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in months. Whitaker nailed an old board to the gate and carved into it the letters rough but resolute. Haven House, where every soul is seen. I turned back. Raven was stepping slowly onto the porch. The wound around her neck had closed, leaving a thin scar. Her eyes met mine. I saw no fear there anymore, only peace, as if she knew her pain had not been wasted. I knelt beside her, stroked her head, and whispered, "You did what none of us had the courage to do. You made this town look at itself." Raven tilted her head, then rested her muzzle on my hand. Scout and Lila ran to her side, curling at her feet. The three of them stood together in the pale light. Such a simple scene, yet I saw in it everything the world needed, the quiet resilience of the smallest lives. That night, Haven House glowed with light for the first time. There were no sermons, no priests, no ceremony. Only the once silent people of Ravenwood sit together by the fire, sharing soup, telling the story of a hanging Doberman, 2 pups who refused to flee, and a single bark that woke an entire town. I wrote in my journal, "I didn't save them. They saved me, from the paralysis of my own heart." Emily leaned against my shoulder. Raven lay by the fire, eyes half closed. Scout stirred and pressed against her belly. Outside, the wind moved through the old sycamore, its leaves rustling like the earth itself, whispering an apology. I knew there would still be pain in this world, other creatures left behind, other nights heavy with silence. But here, in Ravenwood, for the first time in years, we had not turned away. And sometimes, that alone is enough to start the world again. That night, I couldn't sleep. The fire had died down to a bed of glowing coals, but Raven stayed beside me. Every now and then her lips twitched in a dream, perhaps of open fields where she once was chained, or maybe of the freedom she had finally reached. I watched her and realized something. The world doesn't change because of grand miracles. It changes when someone, just one person, stops on a cold road and says, "No, I won't turn away." This story was never really mine. It belonged to Raven, to Scout, to Lila, to a town that had forgotten how to love and learned again from those who couldn't speak. If you've ever seen eyes that pleaded without words, if you've ever heard a faint cry in the dark and couldn't walk away, do the small thing. Stop. Listen. Reach out. Because sometimes that one act doesn't just save an animal. It saves what's still human in us. I'm Sarah, and that night, I learned that no one truly saves anyone. We just remind each other that compassion still exists. If this story touched you, click "Thanks from the Heart," so we can keep telling stories of kindness, of small lives that made the world a little softer. And if you've ever saved someone, or been saved, share your story below. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to read it tonight. Don't turn away. Because somewhere, a soul is waiting for you to live one more day.